Do security professionals limit themselves when they ask if they can secure something? How would the approach and the problem-solving change if they instead asked how?
You're listening to Defense in Depth.
Welcome to Defense in Depth. My name is David Spark. I'm the producer of the CISO series, and joining me as my co-host, he's normally not the co-host of this show, so don't get confused, because many people would. He normally co-hosts the CISO series podcast, but you'll see in a moment why he's co-hosting this episode. It's Mike Johnson, CISO of Rivian. Mike, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience, and surprise, I'm back.
He's back. Now, it doesn't throw you at all, Mike, that you record this show when you normally record the other show.
I'm a professional, David. I pick this up and I go. I mean, we've been doing this, I think we decided almost 7 years. So yeah, I got this.
Almost 7 years. It's mind-blowing. Yes, I'm impressed. All right. Our sponsor for today's episode is Query. Security data is everywhere. Put it to work. Query, it's a federated search and analytics platform that essentially connects all your data sources. No more manual connections yourself. They do it for you. More about just that a little bit later in the show. Mike, the topic is you're responsible for it. And let me just set it up for everybody else. Tapping into a creative mindset is an underappreciated skill in cybersecurity. And Mike, you pointed out on LinkedIn that we often don't allow ourselves to think creatively when we ask if we can secure something rather than how can we do it. Now, this more positive approach is similar to the yes and rule of improv and very opposite security's poor branding of being a department of no. So let me just ask you, when you do this exercise, and hopefully it actually becomes a mantra for security, what are the broader benefits to opening yourself up to creative possibility, Mike?
You very much nailed it with the yes and approach to improv. That was in the back of my mind as I was writing this. And it really is all about just changing the way that you think. It's very easy to just be closed off, to say no. But if you force yourself to say how, rather than no, maybe, yes, it moves it from a binary question into that different part of your brain that gets you creative and gets you thinking about what can we actually do. It may still not be a great idea. It may still lead you down a path of, wow, this would be really difficult to do. But it might also get you to a place of, we can actually do this pretty easily. And then you take it back to the business or you take it back to the requester and say, yeah, we can do this. Here's what it would take. Quite often, they'll then jump in and go, oh, okay, great, we can do that. And that then moves it away from yes, no to everybody gets what they need out of it.
And I'm looking for a yes, no answer from you. Have you pulled this off? Have you gone to the how mode and actually secured something that an initial response would have been no, like, no, we can't, from you initially thinking it?
Absolutely. And it happens so often that I have a hard time coming up with an example because it really is a way of thinking and it's a way of making progress.
The Mike Johnson philosophy of approaching security. That's how, by the way, I'm branding it right there.
Okay. Thanks, David. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mike. All right. The person who's going to join us in this discussion, he's excited about being part of this discussion as well. We're going to find out if this is his philosophy as well. He may steal the branding from you, Mike. We're going to find out in a moment. He is the VP and CSO and head of infrastructure over at Micron Technology, none other than Hanan Schwartzbord. Hanan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, David. It's great to listen to you every day on my way to the work, and great to have you here, Mike, as well.
How important is this issue?
Pete Salama said, quote, your comment on how can we versus can we is one of growth versus fixed thinking. Love that. I mean, that nails it right there. Throughout my career, the how can we question was my default go-to. I considered it an opportunity to grow, to help the business grow. One of the roles of security is to provide checks and balances to enable the business to operate securely, reducing risk, not to limit its innovation and operations. I mean, That quote is on the friggin' money right there. And Alexandra Melnikova of SquareX said, quote, "We need more how-to approaches rather than a can-I attitudes in cybersecurity, especially with Gen AI. Many organizations choose to block these tools entirely, which may secure an enterprise, but isn't always the most efficient strategy." So, Mike, both Pete and Alexandra are fully on board here.
Yes, and I give a lot of credit for Pete in that if he's done that his entire career, that's not how I was taught. The early days of security was very much the Department of No mentality, and this is something that we've evolved over time. So kudos to Pete for always asking the how his entire career. I think it's, again, an example of how we've progressed as a career.
I'm throwing this to you, Hanan. I didn't even ask you because have you adopted this philosophy yourself? Give us sort of your background. And did you start with the can we and evolve into how?
I've been doing security for over 25 years. We absolutely didn't start with a yes. We started with a hard no. Started with blocking everything that we could. We started making life as hard as we can because we didn't know anything else. And we were IT guys trying to do their best job. I think over the last years, probably the last 5-10 years, there's obviously the CISO mentality of we are going to enable the business, which is a good next step in our evolution. I think now we're starting to move into the next step of the evolution. The AI, the LLM evolution is forcing us to make changes and to have that level of flexibility to better understand the business, to better understand the challenges, to better understand the opportunities, and to see how we can better connect them. One of the things that I'm really excited about my position in Micron is managing both the IT infrastructure and the security team. And my job is to find ways to securely enable the business to do it right the first time, but as default, making sure that we're saying yes, and yes, but in some cases, but still find the ways to do it.
So let me ask you about the creative exercise itself. I'm sure you've been posed a challenge and your first sort of knee-jerk reaction might be, oh, yikes, can we do that? How do you shift yourself into that? And again, I'm sure there's lots of examples, but just give me one example of something, and you don't have to be specific to your business, but just like an example so we can understand what this is.
My method is using squishy balls and breathing. I use the same breathing my wife was taught for labor, so usually it works. I think what we're trying to do is really analyze what the risk is. We've done a really good job better understanding what is the risk to us, what do we consider as a high risk. And we focus on those risks and we focus on trying to really understand what the business is trying to do. Are they trying to create a new LLM or are they trying to use something off the shelf? Are they trying to open a port to who knows where, or they're trying to just connect to one of the vendors? I think the challenge is really understanding what the risk is and what the business is trying to do, and then finding smart ways to allow that.
How would you handle this situation?
Let's put the how theory to the test. Here's a discussion about how to secure AI. First, David Ethington of Paramount said, quote, "It helps that most new things, despite being new, tend to follow foundational tech rules. AI takes input and generated output, albeit in a complicated manner. That being said, it has already been shown that you can introduce data that can impact the system in various ways." And David Wood Messerly of Cyberhaven said, quote, "Seeing how a lot with the questions, we're getting asked a lot like, how can we put guardrails on shadow AI apps to prevent sensitive/confidential data egress/ingress, source code, intellectual property, customer data, etc., with public LLMs?" So I think this example just around LLMs in the how, I'm sure this has come up. It's come up with absolutely everybody right now. How have you approached this how discussion around AI and LLMs, Hanan?
That's actually a really good question, one that I'm sure every CISO and every CIO are facing right now. I think the challenge is really understanding what are we trying to do and what the business is trying to access, and then creating the guardrails around that. I think the challenges are that some of the tools that we've been working to fix and tools that we've been trying to work with, DLP, for example, identity, for example, we haven't fixed them. We don't really understand our data. We still don't really understand who's trying to do what. And the challenge is that LLM engines, the AI requirements that the business has for us at this point, are just magnifying those gaps. I think what we're trying to focus on and the way that we're looking at these problems is really focusing on understanding what those LLMs are going to access and analyzing the risk from the business perspective, and then putting the right guardrails to reduce that risk, still enabling it where it makes sense.
Give me an idea of the kinds of guardrails you would put in for an LLM concerned about certain data sharing, access, entry, whatever it would be.
I think the first step that we did is really go back and understand our data, focus on our mostly classified data and put the right controls around that. Controls like role-based access, IP protection, segmentation of our network, segmentation of our environment, making sure that the just-in-time concept is in play, the zero trust concepts are in play, making sure that when we start walking into the LLM era, into the AI era, we have the same controls put in place to provide the same level of protection to the company, but still allowing them to access the data that they need.
All right. I'm throwing this to you, Mike. I am sure you've had this conversation about AI, LLMs constantly. What I'm buoyed by with AI is very few organizations truly blocked it because we've had a history of that with new technologies initially gets blocked. But most realize the benefit here. Were you more saying like, let people play with AI here, let's create guardrails like what Hanan mentioned? Or did you say, let's have very business case specific situations and only build it for just that? How did you look at the problem?
The early days of AI, people were still trying to figure out what the heck to do with these things. A business case or a use case specific model didn't work then. What we had to do was, and this is the concept of guardrails, is give them the playground that's safe, that they can go and do whatever the heck they want in. We know that we can trust that environment. We know that the data that goes in stays in there. We know where it's going to go, what it's going to be used for. And that allowed us to then identify the business cases by those teams actually getting in there, playing around, experimenting. And that then allowed us to say, okay, well, for these use cases, we're going to use this LLM. And this is how we're going to engage with it. And for these use cases, we're going to use this one. And this is how we engage with that. So we reached a point where the guardrails truly are what they mean. If you're staying between them, have at. Here's all the ways that you can use it. Here's how you can use it. If you want to go outside of that, it actually will be blocked. And we need to have a discussion about that.
And let me ask the two of you, and again, if it's sensitive, you don't have to say it, but were there any mistake? Because I can't imagine you got this right on the first try. Things like this need tweaking. What did you find yourself tweaking, I guess?
I think when we started the process, we went a little bit too far with our controls. We were too restrictive. We were too concerned about the level of access. At the same time, we blocked. We found ourselves blocking some of the tools because we weren't sure on how they work and what exposure will occur there. And I think the combination, and over time, we felt more comfortable about what we're sharing and how we're sharing that.
Before I go on any further, I do want to tell you about our spectacular sponsor, and that would be Query. Now, for decades, security teams have been chasing context, trying to piece together the right data at the right time to make the right calls. It's kind of what it's all about, right? Now, what's the problem? Well, that data lives everywhere, in different tools, in different formats, and in silos. And more often than not, it's the analysts who are left stitching it all together manually. This is exactly where Query comes in. Query is a federated search and analytics platform that connects directly to your distributed data. So no ETL pipelines, no centralization required, just API connections to the tools and systems you already use. It creates what is known as a security data mesh, bringing the power of your existing stack together to deliver real-time context without the heavy lift. Even better, being more efficient with your data leads to lower SIM costs. So mission-specific AI agents and copilots They handle the tedious parts, triaging alerts, pulling in contextual data, enriching results, and surfacing next steps. So teams make better decisions faster. Security data is everywhere. Put yours to work. Go to their website. Check out what it is all about. It's query.ai, QUERY.ai. And when you go there, let them know that the CISO series sent you there.
How do we determine what's most important?
Robert R. said, quote, also consider the why, especially if it is in the early acquisition stages. Might be other alternatives to include process improvements, impact additional costs not realized. And Tom Kanan of Mob said, quote, I like the mindset shift. I usually break things down with why plus how. Why this? Why now? Why this specific thing? Understanding the why in this example, you get the business context and big picture lens, helps me craft at least some of the strategy for how, securing it effectively while balancing and productivity, etc. I guess why is probably baked in here, but still, personally, it helps me break it down that way. All right. So I think this is good, like combining the how with why. Do you ask that question, Mike?
When I think about Tom's response, for me, the why is inherent.
Yeah. And he says it could be baked in here, but he likes to break it out so he's sort of understanding his two tracks.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's a very good add to then break that out because you do need to understand the why. That helps you understand the path that you're on if it's going to make sense. A great example is if you're heading down a path of, hey, we're going to secure this thing with MFA and CAPTCHAs and we're not going to have an API. If you then find out that the system needs to be used by other systems, by other services, you've now backed yourself into a corner and you've got to go re-engineer. So the why is very critical. I think it's a good add to just say, hey, rather than yes or no, we're going to say why and how. And that then is a great way of thinking about things.
The other thing of why, I'm throwing this to you, Hanan, is you can understand the intent of the business here. The business says, we want to do this. And you say, well, why do you want to do it? And then if you understand the intent, that can kind of drive your security. Have you asked the why? And has that changed how you approach the issue?
Absolutely. We have to ask the why. It helps us really better understand what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it. And it helps us better understand how do we provide them access to data, access to the LLM or to the AI or whatever they're trying to do. I think if we try to do something without really understanding the why, we might impose too many controls or not enough controls, and we might expose things that we don't want to, or just provide a tool that's not efficient and they don't get the productivity that they're trying to get out of it. So I absolutely agree with the comment, and I agree with everything that Mike said. I think that's something that we as CISOs and practitioners are starting to understand more and more, that it's not enough for us to try to imagine what they're trying to do. And I know I'm taking it a little bit too much, but I think it's important for us to really understand why they're trying to do something, not just the what they're trying to do.
And let me just throw this out, because one of the exercises we've talked about on the show is the Japanese philosophy of the 5 whys or the 6 whys, 5 whys, I believe.
It's 5 whys, and it comes from Toyota, actually.
But this is even a deeper philosophy of why, in the sense that you keep asking why to get to the root reason for doing the thing. And I know we've talked about the 5 whys as a way to look at when you have an incident. Why did this happen? Why? Would it work as well in this case, Mike?
I think it might be a bit overkill, and it might be a bit annoying to just keep asking why.
Like you're a little child?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think you need to take it that far in order to get the context. And
Okay.
that's really what you're after. And I really like what Hanan was saying is it helps you rationalize your controls and prevents you from either going too far or not far enough.
I would add to that, one of the reasons that we have to stay close to the business is exactly following what Mike said. If we continuously ask, we'll just be annoying. But if we're part of them, if we immerse ourselves in the business and become part of the business, it's not the group that says the business all the time, which I hate when we say, I think that would make a significant difference.
how do I start?
James Porter said, quote, "How is an awesome word. 2 words I have changed is can and issues to how and challenges. I am even teaching this to my kids. It forces us to think out of the box. So how and challenges rather than issues to challenges is what he looks at." And lastly, Julia Flick of Hook Security said, "Yes and all day," making a reference to the improv line. "This is why you want theater kids on your team." Let me ask you, Mike, do you have any theater or improv performers on your security team?
I don't know on my current one, but I did on my last one for sure.
Did you? Well, I don't know if you know this. I used to write for Second City out of Chicago, and I was forced to take improv classes because I had to write in the Second City way.
That makes you perfect for cybersecurity, David.
Perfect. Yeah, well, perfect. Or writing, hopefully, jokes for Second City, too, for that matter. So here's the next thing I want to do, and I want to get into this with both of you. Of like a lot of this, where you say instead of can, then how, but what are the sort of exercise questions you ask to sort of delve and look into other avenues? Like you may only be thinking, well, we obviously have to slap some kind of MFA on this. And you think, well, maybe if we don't do that, we could just read the signals on the computer and we don't need to ask an MFA, and we could use the information on the computer to be our second signal. I'm giving some random example, but how do you get them to not only be thinking in one avenue? Or what are the questions you ask?
Well, it's a combination of returning to your philosophies, returning to your principles. To say, like, a principle might be, we try and avoid agents at all costs. Like that's a principle. And then that then sends you down a path when you're asking these how questions of, we're trying to avoid it. We can do it if we need to. And that, again, is back to right-sizing your controls and rationalizing for the situation. So it's really, you should have a set of principles that you fall back on, that you factor in when you're asking these how questions.
And do you ever do this thing, because say like, what if we couldn't use MFA at all here? Or what if we couldn't do this at all in here? How would we handle it? Hanan, I'm going to you. Do you play that game? Like, what if we just couldn't use these classic security controls we normally use?
Unfortunately, it happens. It happens all the time. We don't always end up using the Cadillac of companies because they don't always have the solutions that we need. And we end up working with startups and they don't always invest in security first. They're focused on their MVP. And you have to find a way to work around that. So we have a really rigorous process where we validate the security, we validate the risk, we discuss the risk, we present the risk, and unfortunately, in some cases, you have to go through a process of risk acceptance once we have enough control and mitigating controls around that. But I think as practitioners, it's something that all of us have to feel comfortable assessing the risk, understanding the business case and the business benefit, and measuring the two against each other and making a decision at the end of the day.
I'm going to ask you the same question of, have you limited, like in terms of trying to get them to think in a different way, say, okay, this thing is off the table. We can't do this, this, and this. How would you solve this problem? Have you tried that, Mike?
For sure. Again, it comes back to, we may be making a decision of, we will not support a certain type of MFA, or we will only support a certain type of MFA.
And also, it's almost impossible to get 100% on board on an MFA too, right?
Different situation, but that is something that you do have to factor in. And I think Hanan's example of working with vendors or suppliers is a really good one, where you're frankly backed into a corner in a way of, all right, well, okay, we have to get creative.
Yeah, the company says, we have to work with this vendor. You got to figure it out.
Correct. And a great example, and we'll always come back to this, is single sign-on. And today, people are still writing new applications that do not support single sign-on. And that's an area where you've got to make some pretty difficult decisions.
Have you considered shaking your fist? Does that work at all?
I try it, and it still hasn't worked. Every day I'm shaking my fist at someone who doesn't support SSO. And
you should get to do it to the sky.
Oh, I've been doing it wrong. I'll try that.
You're shaking it to the ground. That's your problem.
I'll have been shaking in the wrong direction, David. I will take that and adjust.
Jesus, I have to explain really basic security philosophy to you, don't I? All right. Well, that brings us to the portion of the show. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Hanan. Where I'm going to ask both of you, which quote was your favorite and why? And I'm going to ask you first, Hanan. Looking at all the quotes that I mentioned here, which quote was your favorite and why?
I really enjoyed the discussion on why, and sorry, pun intended in this case. I think having ourselves ask ourselves, why are we doing the things that we're doing?
So are you mentioning Tom Kanans? Because he's the one who brought up why here too, as did Robert.
Yes, that's true. I think when we talk about better understanding what our partners are trying to do and why are you trying to do it, find maybe in some cases better ways to do it, and understanding the limits of our ability to impose on our businesses what's the right thing to do, and remembering that at the end of the day, it's about the productivity and the bottom line, not just our fancy security policies. It helps us to focus on what's really important.
Okay. Mike, your favorite quote and why?
I completely agree with Hanan. I think Robert R. and Tom Kanan's point about specifically thinking about the why, great add to the concept and great add to our toolboxes to make sure that we're incorporating that into our decision making.
So that's your favorite quote as well?
Yes, absolutely.
You didn't go, like Pete Salama literally agreed with you 1,000%. You didn't go with him?
I'm going with the one that I think added to the conversation.
Pete was excellent as well.
Yes, I'm glad that that Pete was very excited about what I had to say, but I do think that adding to the conversation, adding to it brings even more value. They were all great quotes. These were all great quotes.
Huge thanks to our sponsor, and that would be Query. Remember, Query.ai. Let them know that the CISO series sent you there, and learn about how, you can get all the data from all your sources in one place so you can make more intelligent decisions. And in fact, let some of the AI do the work for you, too. Query.ai. I want to thank you, Hanan. Thank you so much. That was Hanan Schwartzbord, who is a VP and CSO and head of infrastructure at Micron Technology, who joined us today. Thank you again. Hope you had a good time. Yes?
It was great. Thank you for having me, David. It was great talking with you, Mike, as well.
Awesome. And thank you, Mike, as always, for making the crossover all the way to Defense in Depth. I know it's a huge leap for you. It's a mental struggle to make it to this show.
It's like walking down the street and opening up a whole new house, a different door that I was just not expected, and it worked out just well.
You made it. I want to thank our audience, as always. We greatly appreciate your contributions. And by the way, if you ever see a cool discussion online on LinkedIn that's got a lot of comments, you're like, oh, this would be a great episode of Defense in Depth, send it to me, david@cisoseries.com. As simple as that. I would love to see it. Thank you very much, everybody. Again, we appreciate your contributions and listening to Defense in Depth.
We've reached the end of Defense in Depth. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss yet another hot topic in cybersecurity. This show thrives on your contributions. Please write a review, leave a comment on LinkedIn or on our site, CISOseries.com, where you'll also see plenty of ways to participate, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@cisoseries.com. Thank you for listening to Defense in Depth.